Right. I'm live now on YouTube and on X live spaces. So on X, which was formerly known as Twitter. So we're live there and on YouTube, Eternal Iran on YouTube, and then obviously Johnny Nash on X live spaces. I haven't done one for a while. Uh, Life, busy, all that kind of stuff. But I thought it important to do so now in terms of what we're seeing. So today we have witnessed the Islamic Republic just strike out. Earlier on in the day, there was reports of some strikes on two US warships, or destroyers, two US ships. It was being reported. It was stated by Islamic Republic media that they had hit these ships, and then CENTCOM said no, they haven't hit them. And the US has said that in the Strait of Hormuz, remember all of this is around the Strait of Hormuz as well, the Islamic Republic have been leveraging the Strait of Hormuz for economic terrorism in trying to ratchet up the price of oil and gas, which has really been affecting economies, because if it hits beyond $125, it really is quite catastrophic. So it's an important development in terms of what goes on next with the Strait of Hormuz. That's been their ace in their cards in how they've tried to leverage it. Economic terrorism, piracy on the seas, whatever you want to call it. So strikes on two US ships, and then a purported strike on the UAE. UAE seems to be really in the focus of the Islamic Republic right now. The UAE as well, in the last week, has come out of OPEC, which is the cartel that kind of sets the quotas in terms of oil in the market, which then affects prices, etc. So the UAE came out of that. I think the UAE is the third largest producer of oil in the region. Not Dubai. Dubai doesn't have any oil. It's reinvented itself. It's been a tourist hub. It's been a crypto hub. Been a money laundering hub as well at times, allegedly. But it's reinvented itself, and it's done a good job. And the original idea of Dubai, by the way, came from Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. It was with Quiche. Quiche was the Dubai of the past, but didn't get to do that because in 1979, Islamic Republic came in. So the UAE has really been in the eyesight of the Islamic Republic to really go after that particular GCC country. And there's reports of the UAE getting closer to Israel, and in terms of collaboration and moving forwards, and with what's going on with US, they say that a lot of these attacks, they describe it as attacks, the Islamic Republic is coming from the UAE, and UAE have their hands in it. So they're targeting the UAE. They're doing it deliberately because the UAE is very much one of the key areas in the GCC. Let's be honest. Most people know about Dubai, right? The oil of the UAE is in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is where a lot of the in terms of the oil quota of that country comes from. And the reality is Abu Dhabi has enabled Dubai to be Dubai, because Dubai was able to do what it did in terms of being able to utilize and work together with Abu Dhabi, because UAE is made up of these kind of areas of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, the Emirates, but they come under the United Arab Emirates in terms of them as a country. Anyway, they got hit, the ship as well. It was empty though. It wasn't carrying a load. And now, in the last couple of hours or so, there are reports that Dubai has been hit, or missiles have been launched towards Dubai. So Dubai has issued emergency missile alerts. The US have claimed as well that they've been able to get ships across the Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic Republic is denying this. So the UAE, it's just been reported here, intercepts Islamic Republic missiles as drone causes fire at a petrol plant, folks. it's been reported to the Sky News here. The United Arab Emirates is reporting attacks from the Islamic Republic, drones. Drones has been something which the Islamic Republic has, let's call a spade, done well in. Russia was utilizing I think the Shahed drones in terms of the conflict with Ukraine. But they've been utilizing these drones. They've been hit with what was going on with US and Israel in terms of the conflict. But they still have quite a bit of drones. Anyway, the UAE is reporting attacks from the Islamic Republic. Its defense ministry has said it's intercepted. Yes, look, it's more than drones here. It has intercepted 3 missiles over territorial waters, with a 4th crashing into the sea. A drone has caused a fire to erupt at a petroleum industrial site in Fajura. So which part of Dubai? I don't know. I don't know the part of Dubai. So we're live on YouTube. Tell your friends and all that. Come on, folks. Then I can get loads of people to come in and make it more interesting for you guys and everything else that goes with it. So the drone went under the water, someone said. It crashed into the sea, apparently. It crashed into the sea. Well, not the drone. The drone hit a petroleum plant, but there were 3 missiles, but the 4th crashed into the sea. So Iraq, the Islamic Republic, I'm looking at Ayatollah Sky News as well on this, and I'll be looking at my phone and other sources in terms of giving you the latest updates. So I'll be multitasking. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at stuff to try and update everything. But there are explosions in Jebel Ali in Dubai. There are explosions in Jebel Ali. And it seems like the Islamic Republic has just been lashing out left, right, and center, because apparently it tried to hit a South Korean ship as well. You do know why they're doing this, right? You do know why they're doing this. Because they want to create as much chaos and mayhem so that the Brent crude oil prices go up and up and up, which then cause so much pain. You know, there's a battle of wills. That's where wars are won, right? Who can break the will of the other? The Islamic Republic, with one side of the equation, feels like they're winning. Right? They're winning because they feel like they've got the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore they've got the West by the cojones. And they're trying to inflict as much pain on the pumps, because then if energy prices go up, and it then affects the food, and it affects interest rates and stuff like that. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem, folks. I can't understate that. It really is. It affects people, their homes, everything else that goes with it. So something's got to be done with this Strait of Hormuz. So what the United States was doing, they were doing a blockade. Because according to reports, the blockade was stopping $500 million a day, was hitting the Islamic Republic for $500 million a day, because they couldn't get their oil out. It was aimed at the Islamic Republic. Other ships were able to go through and pass. And it then has knock-on effects on other things, like, I didn't know that 20% of the world's fertilizers came from the Strait of Hormuz, for example, and other things. It's amazing how interconnected the world we live in, which is good in one sense, but bad in another. So someone says here, they took Trump's bait. That's why I hear. Because it seems like the Islamic Republic, they did this so-called revised peace process, this BS process, where it says stage 1 is this, stage 2 is that, stage 1,000 is this, the usual stuff. Because as Mark Rubio said, the only thing that the Islamic Republic are interested in is buying more time. And that's absolutely correct. The only thing that the Islamic Republic are interested in is buying more time. It's always been like that. They just try to come out with these elongated kind of proposals and stuff about nothing, but over nothing, and talk, just to buy time. Because they know the midterms are coming in November. They see events happening, like Trump is due to go to China in a week as well. Big event. The World Cup is in July. So it's some big events are taking and taking place. And then you've got the elections in Israel around, I think, winter time. So they're trying to buy some more time with all of this. And I think the blockade's hurting. The blockade is hurting because it seems like to me that the Islamic Republic have just lashed out because they want a reaction. They want the US and Israel to strike them, it seems like, because then it will affect the oil and energy prices, and then it will inflict pain. And then they hope that populations in the West will then put pressure on politicians to stop, because it's affecting everyday business and life and everyday people's households, which then has a knock-on effects, because politicians always look at things like in terms of their own interest. So someone says here, do you know the old Christian saying, if they slap you, bring the other cheek? I think this is a similar situation. I think that was Jesus's. I'm not a big religious guy, I'm not into religion, but I think turn the other cheek was the catchphrase. So they have lashed out. Then the Islamic Republic are saying that the US claims of ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz are baseless and complete lies, because they always tell the truth. Of course not. But anyhow, so the Islamic Republic has rejected claims that 2 US-flagged merchant vessels have crossed through the Strait of Hormuz. In comments reported by the semi-official Tasnim news agency, which is affiliated to the IRGC, it says that no commercial vessel or tanker has crossed the key waters in the past few hours. It also calls claims by the US as baseless and complete lies. Earlier, US Central Command said that Navy-guided destroyers are operating in the Persian Gulf after transiting through the strait. Meanwhile, the US Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News his country has absolute control of the strait. So South Korea, as I mentioned a bit earlier, is investigating a vessel hit in the Strait of Hormuz, is verifying the cause of a fire and details of damage on a South Korean flagged vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. 24 people on board. No reports of injuries. Then Hezbollah again in on the act in terms of rocket launches, as they do in Lebanon. So on what's going on here is, does attacking the UAE constitute a breach of the ceasefire? Well, I would say yes, wouldn't you? Well, some would argue technically they weren't in the conflict or the war, were they? It was the United States and Israel. They were affected by the war because they were getting repeatedly hit. And remember, the United Arab Emirates and Dubai in particular, the Islamic Republic did a lot of business with them. You know, used to do a lot of financial stuff, their business, their ability to evade sanctions, etc., ability to just operate was very much utilized via Dubai and the banking system there. And I think there's about 500,000 Iranians inside United Arab Emirates as well, because it's only a doorstep away in terms of proximity. So I'm just looking at the further headlines of this, because it's an interesting state of affairs where, how will Trump react to this then? Because one would argue that maybe the Islamic Republic are just trying their utmost to get the United States and Israel back into that situation of war, then inflate the prices and affect the economic state of affairs to then ultimately try to get better terms and ultimately win. But others argue that it's the United States who's set the trap and the bait, and the Islamic Republic have finally bit on the bait through this blockade, which I think is really hurting. If you look at the real in terms of currency, which was worth less than toilet paper before, prior to the 12-day war, 12-day conflict last year, God, time just goes by. The real, I think, was about a million, something like that, 1.2, 1.1, something like that to the dollar. Now it's nearly 2 million reals to the dollar, which then has a real compounding effect on inflation. And I saw a report on mainstream media that basically the cost of essentials like just everyday drugs, not drugs, like, drugs like the things that you need to take in terms of your health. Regular things that you would need, like antibiotics, stuff from a medicine's perspective, has just gone through the roof because of the what's gone on with the war. And 1 million jobs have been lost since the start of this war. 1 million jobs have been lost, and another 30 million are to be lost. So it's affected the West, don't get me wrong, a lot in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, which I hope they sort out, because that can't go on. That can't go on. And this weaponization of it is, I think the UAE has got it right here. It's piracy on the seas, right? So it's a very interesting time of what happens here. In terms of the latest developments. As this set of developments that has happened today, because it seems like they've moved their piece on the chessboard. Some people say, is it because they went through a decentralized process, right, in terms of their control and command, because it's been obliterated in so many ways. And they had decentralized it before the war, where they were each part of their security apparatus, military, etc., of the Islamic Republic, had their own commanders and set of instructions. Some say, oh, maybe it was one of these that had gone rogue, because prior to that, you have Galabaf and co, which were doing all these peace talks, weren't they? So, but then Galabaf goes on Twitter saying $140, $200 in terms of the oil price, glean, loving it in terms of economic damage and what they're trying to do with the Strait of Hormuz. And then I heard as well, was it their ambassador to the United Nations, or it was somebody who basically said that the choice for the Trump administration is either an impossible deal, is either an impossible military conflict, which they will be defeated by and they will lose, or a bad deal. So it's either the choice of an impossible military conflict, which they're destined to lose, or a bad deal. That's the choice before them. The arrogance of these guys, right? The arrogance, it just never ends, doesn't it? It never, ever ends, because they've got the Strait of Hormuz. And until that equation changes, then it won't change. So I'm just seeing here, commercial flights over the UAE are in a holding pattern. It's also being reported that the UK Maritime Association has said that a cargo ship off the north of Dubai has reported an engine room fire. So apparently the IRGC has just struck that as well. So at the moment, the Islamic Republic is tempting everyone to attack them at this point, right? They haven't hit Saudi though, and they haven't hit Qatar, their brother from another mother, prior to this war, which didn't go too well in terms of their relationship after being struck repeatedly to Qatar. They struck them repeatedly and said, "Oh, we don't mean it against you." So where does this go next? Will the US resist any action and just keep going down this path of blockade? And also, he launched Project Freedom, didn't he, Trump? Yesterday, that took place this morning, Middle Eastern time. Project Freedom in opening up the Strait of Hormuz. So will they just carry on with that line of things, as opposed to being suckered in to what the regime wanted them to do? Because it seems like the regime want to have the escalation in order to affect the markets, and then in order to then put pressure onto the European Union, the world economy, the US, etc. By doing that, by trying to affect the oil price. Let's see the oil price. No, I don't want to look. Okay, it's at 113 at the moment. I know, but that's not open in London, is it? Let me see, because we are on a bank holiday. Today, just looking at the price of oil today. So Brent crude, what's the day today? 4th of May. It's actually trading $110. So it's only up $2.50 on the day. It's fluctuated a lot. Don't get me wrong, start this whole thing, it was $65. It needs to go way down. So I think the US knows this. The Trump administration knows this, that the regime, all they want to do is mayhem and chaos to bring up these prices. That is their game plan. It's economic warfare via their mosquito boats, etc. And if you know that and you're mindful of that, you don't want to then fall into their trap. You want to actually do the opposite, for them to fall into your trap in terms of bait, to take the bait, which looks like what's kind of happening right now. And if you want to come on, let me know on X. Just send me a message, and I'll just send you the link so we can have the conversation. Oh, but then someone says here, Brent crude just spiked over $119 following attacks on vessels in the Strait and drone attack on UAE. This Strait of Hormuz is a problem, folks. It is a problem. They should have known about this, really. So, new round of incoming missile alerts for the UAE. They're doing non-stop attacks. 2 UAE linked ships are on fire. 2 UAE linked ships are on fire. Fajura port is in smoke after IRGC attacks. Interesting, folks. Interesting. So it looks like they've made the decision to go all out for it, in particular targeting the UAE. But do we think they're going to stop at that? Or do we think, in fact, they're not? They're actually going to go next to Saudi, Qatar, like what they did before? Because these prices are a problem. And the Europeans just sit on their hands as well. I don't know what they're playing at. They keep saying it's not our war. All right, but you're the ones that need it the most. We need it the most in terms of Europe. I mean, United Kingdom, it doesn't need any of the oil from the Strait of Hormuz, because it gets nearly all of it from the North Sea, which it shares with Norway and other territories. But jet fuel is the problem. But then oil is not set by, it's set by globally, isn't it? In terms of price. And the US doesn't need it, but it affects the prices at the gas pump and then affects everything else. So they're targeting big time the UAE. They did mention this, right, folks? Didn't they? They mentioned that the UAE, I think yesterday, wasn't it? They had new evidence that the UAE had been involved in bombing the Islamic Republic. Something on those lines, from what I can remember, which in hindsight now has set up what we're witnessing today. So what are they going to say then? The Islamic Republic, Galabath and Peshkian and Cohen, Arakchi, Abbas, the Foreign Secretary. Are they going to say, well, it's not us, it's them, it's Vahidi, it's the other hardliners, etc., that are causing the problems, that they're the ones doing it? Or one, like they did with that tweet. Do you remember the tweet they all did at once? One God, one religion, one nation, one flag. That nonsense that they wrote. It's amazing they get they try to invoke nationalism, which Iranians are highly patriotic and nationalist, whenever there's times like this, but they couldn't give a stuff about it and hate all things Iranian on other times. Hate Nehru's, hate cultural stuff, hate anything in reference to the kings, because there's no history without monarchy in terms of Iran. It's just fact. Hate all of that. But when it's times like this, suddenly invoke all that kind of stuff, because they're very manipulative. So it seems like the UAE is definitely the focus. So what do we think the US will do next? What will Trump say next? I'm sure he's been advised by Ratcliffe, the CIA director, Rubio, national security. He's in charge of national security. He's got two jobs, isn't he? And Secretary of State. And then you've got Pete, the War Secretary. Thanks, Azita, for reposting the stream. Repost the stream, folks. I'm here just to facilitate this discussion, so that you have voices that genuinely care about Iran and Iranians, and also tell the hard truths, say how it is, etc. So, often the Trump administration is being accused of, they don't have a plan. I think the Chancellor of Germany was saying that, the US have been humiliated, he said, in the last week or so by the Islamic Republic. He's the king of flip-flops, isn't he? At one point, he says that the Islamic Republic have not much time. It's a question of weeks. when the protests were erupting, and then talking about how they stand shoulder to shoulder with the US and this and stuff. And then he said that, and then he flip flops again yesterday, talking about how US is their most important partner when it comes to NATO, and that they are of one in terms of the Islamic Republic cannot have a nuclear weapon. The king of flip flops. And that's what infuriates you, right? The inconsistency and the two-facedness. I mean, you've got Macron the jerk, who talks in so many sides to his face that you forget which one is the real. Will the real Macron stand up? And the French, France is a great country and a great culture. Terrible government who, throughout history, is always disappointed, always let down stuff when it matters. And the French governments have a history on this. Khomeini resided in France with the 1979 Islamic Republic, was conducting his interviews with mustachiyar and onions and sitting on the floor with his entourage in a little chateau in France. Came to Iran on Air France. And then the French governments have continuously done business in Iran with selling Peugeots and Renaults everywhere, as well as Total in terms of petrochemical stuff. And the Germans have also been involved in terms of cars and engineering and other aspects. They've been the main partners of the EU when it comes to the Islamic Republic. Yes, they labeled IRGC as the terrorist organization, etc. Finally, the European Union. But so much flip-flops, and there was reports that the French had done some kind of deal with the Islamic Republic to allow some ships to come through. So people are saying, why the UAE? They're not even targeting any of the US bases. Well, it's because they're targeting the oil. They're the third largest producer. Maybe the plan is to cause some kind of separation amongst the GCC to say, right, we're not going to hit Qatar. We're not going to hit Oman. We're not going to hit Saudi, maybe. We're going to focus on the UAE because the UAE came out of OPEC. The UAE is going to be doing deals with Israel, etc. Try to cause a divide in amongst the GCC on this by just hitting them and using the pretext that they were involved in the bombing, the war. Someone says, how much will the UAE take before they strike back? Look, they have great aeroplanes that they buy from the US, and they're rich. But as military power, they're nowhere near. People don't understand the GCC, the whole of the GCC in terms of the population, it's only 25 million, if that, the whole of it. That's including Saudi. Most of the GCC is all made up of expats from the West, from Asia, India, Philippines, you name it. Like, for example, the UAE, only 10% of the UAE population is Emiratis. 90% is expats. And in the UAE, you can't be a citizen unless it's granted by the sheikh, etc. And unlike, when you live in Canada, US, or UK, or Europe, eventually become a citizen. It's not quite like that. They have golden visas and it's changed a bit, but it's not quite like that. So there isn't that kind of sense of nation state when it comes to military stuff. It gets outsourced to the United States. That's why they kind of do the military contracts, all of that kind of stuff. It's part of that equation. We'll invest in your stock markets, we'll invest in projects, we'll make deals in terms of large military contracts, but you need to be our protector. Look what happened in Qatar. I think the United States wasn't an executive order by Trump saying that if Qatar got hit, that it would be deemed as a strike on the United States. Did get a nice jet out of it as well. So people are saying, I guess the war is back on. Trump can't allow this violation on our allies. The Arabs must come to their rescue. No, they won't come to their rescue. It'd be the US. And then obviously, if the US gets involved, Israel gets involved. But there's a problem on the Strait of Hormuz and economic stuff. You can't keep doing what happened before because the prices are going up and up. And that's what the Islamic Republic wants. That's not smart, is it? And I'm sure they know that. They've got brilliant minds there. So what got you there won't get you here. There has to be a different strategy in order to combat that, because it's quite obvious that they want this to be regional again, this to do what it did again in order to get the prices up. So an oil facility in Fajura has just been hit. An oil facility in Fajura has just been hit by the airstrike. It's been reported as well, the Lebanese president, I don't even know who he is, to be fair, Aoun or something like that, on a potential meeting with Netanyahu. We must reach a security agreement and stop Israeli attacks against us before raising the issue of a meeting between us. Remember that Lebanon is very much Hezbollah infiltrated. It used to be the Switzerland of the Middle East. Not anymore. So Brent crude above $114 after UAE, says Iran, Islamic Republic struck Fajura. So there's a second vessel called Fire, the west of Mina Saker. Excuse my wonderful pronunciations, not. In the UAE, after attacks, a cargo vessel north of Dubai was also on fire, which I mentioned before. Someone says the Islamic Republic is begging for power plant day. Remember what Trump said about power plant day, bridges and power plant day. Obviously, Iranians want the infrastructure to rebuild the country. It's not an Iran problem. It's not an Iran fault. It's not Iranians' fault. There is a minority in Iran of Iranians that have been bad. We have to be honest about it. But the vast majority, 95% or more, want the end of this regime because it's an occupation of the last 47 years. And they're victims massively of this regime. Language matters, folks, in this context. I'm going to check if anyone wants to come. If you want to come up on stage, don't be shy. I know you still run spaces, etc., but I much prefer live than spaces, folks. I find it just better. But I would like to have people on to discuss the matters of the day. So if you want to come up, the problem is a lot of people have their avatars on Twitter, on X Spaces, for obvious reasons. So doing a live, they feel a bit compromised because they feel, oh, I don't want my identity or whatever it might be. Of certain individuals that go by avatars. So maybe they don't feel so comfortable. The Iranians do like to talk. Let's be honest as well. We like to have a chat. So just checking the latest headlines here. Do you think the UAE with their latest jets will strike the Islamic Republic? I told you there's not much of a military. They've got great military equipment, but they're not a military power. The military power in the Middle East is Israel. Then you've got another significant other in Turkey. And then you've got the Islamic Republic. Egypt is in North Africa. But and then the GCC states are just the GCC states. They outsource a lot of it. But the UAE were involved So someone says, I'll come up. Who's that? USA. Oh, come on. Message me. The person who said on X Live, I'll come up. Message me and I'll send you the link. Let me find this link. So they're saying the UAE might hit back, but I don't think so. I think they'll be talking to the United States and Israel on what to do here next. They would have anticipated this as well. This is not. You remember, their whole premise is the oil prices. This is their whole plan. It's economic terrorism. You can't fall for it again. It's caused a lot of damage. They should be smart enough to set the baits, but not then bite on the baits back, unless they're in a situation where they have to retaliate. Like suddenly a US warship is hit and there's casualties, etc. There's no other option at that point. So I'm just going to see who this individual is who wants to come up. Messaged. Okay, hold on. Messaged. Where are you? The message requests. Let's see. Where did you message? Where's the message? I don't see your message. Have you messaged me on Twitter? Message me on Twitter. And then I can bring you up. I have to see who it is first, folks. I don't know who this person is. I probably will do. Hold on. Should be within the last. So check the message request. Let me see. Should have a drum roll. Request. But I'm going to put the link. See if you want to come up. Yeah, put it in the comments. Just click on that because I can't find your message. Yeah, I can't find it. So click on that and then I'll see who you are first of all. And it's true. Someone says the cycle of death and misery will never end until the Islamic regime is ended. Tasnim is citing a military source saying that Tehran is fully prepared for any scenario in the Strait of Hormuz and that the Islamic Republic will not allow Trump and the US forces to bully Iran. Reports of new ballistic missile launches from Bushehr province from Iran. So they've made the decision. They're going all out for it. Oh, hi, Sky. I've sent you the link. It's in the comments. Look at the comments. Just click on that because I can't find your message. It's in the comments. If you see the comments, you'll find my link. And then you just click on that and I'll bring you up on stage. So we've got at the moment 484 people on X Spaces and YouTube. I think I sent it on YouTube. Have I done that? Hold on. Yeah. I'm still getting used to this technology malarkey, folks. Malarkey. Hold on. I don't see, Sky, your message at all. Are you sure you've messaged me? I'm trying to find. Look, I'm gonna do a tweet and then just respond to it. I'm going to say, if you want to come up, click the link to join the discussion on Iran. Okay, I've just clicked it. Yeah, it's not here. I've checked it loads of times. It's not here. So check my tweet. Check my tweet. I've just done a tweet. Just done a tweet with the link. So you can click on that tweet. So go on my profile. I've done a tweet. So yeah. I've just said click the link to join the discussion on Iran. So just click on that. All right. So people are saying, anyone else waiting on President Trump's Truth Social post? Here we go.
It took a little while.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great. A face. No, an avatar.
Good to see you face to face.
Yeah, likewise. What's your thoughts?
Honestly, Iran not Iran, but the IRGC probably just signed their own death warrant. Because I don't think the U.S. can let attacks on the UAE stand.
But don't you think they want them to do that?
Well, here's the thing. The optics are probably going to be different because now it's a defensive war instead of the offensive war that was prior.
So from an international law perspective that the Brits and Europeans were talking about, does that now change the equation with NATO and other countries because it's now defensive as opposed to offensive?
Maybe not with NATO because the UAE is not a NATO member and therefore not protected by Articles 4 or 5. But from an international perspective, I definitely do think this changes things.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the countries that were in the wings, especially the UK, right, which has always been shoulder to shoulder with the United States with these bins, was citing it's not our war, it's not, it goes against international law, etc. There were issues around using certain bases for offensive stuff as opposed to defensive. We're talking about allies. He made a trip in the GCC, Starmer, and all of that kind of stuff. Does this now change that equation?
I hope so. And I never got you can't use our bases because this is an offensive war, even though the Islamic Republic's pummeling our bases just because we're associated with you. It's like once you start getting attacked, it shouldn't matter if it was originally an offensive war by one of your allies. You're getting attacked. You need to respond.
So let's unpack why have the Islamic Republic, the IRGC, decided to do this? Yesterday, they spoke about the UAE and saying they had new evidence about the UAE's involvement in the war and bombing, etc., which may have been a precursor to this in laying down the ground. Is it to divide the GCC? Say, no, we're not going to attack you, Qatar, Oman. We're not going to attack the Saudis. They've come out of OPEC. They're getting close to Israel and the US and the enemies. We're going to strike only against them. Or is it the fact that the blockade is really hurting in terms of $500 million per day being lost and the economic pressure of this, that they want to do as much chaos and mayhem so they can balloon up the energy prices, which then affects global economies, which then affects countries, and then puts the pressure to end all this and have better terms and say, hey, we won?
I think it's more because the blockade's hurting and because they can no longer control the UAE when it comes to oil and gas. I don't think the GCC really factors into their thinking at all. I just personally don't see why it would factor in.
And if you think about it, the UAE was one of their main partners, especially financially, right? A lot of the banking system was utilized in UAE. A lot of stuff around crypto in the UAE. There's about 500,000 Iranians in the UAE, and now that's gone.
The IRGC has definitely shot themselves in the foot when it comes to the UAE. They've definitely, because if I recall, prior to military hostilities breaking out before the war started, them and Qatar and Oman were like the three trying to get this solved diplomatically and having Iran's back.
Yeah, I'm just seeing some headlines here. They're now boasting, and they're showing a image of one of the ships that was struck in the vicinity of the UAE. State TV Fars claims, and then the IRGC spokesperson saying that don't play with fire, and then putting the UAE flag along that message.
That's
So
a threat.
yeah,
That's straight up a threat.
So the calculus is this: the calculus is they've decided to act because it seems like the pressure was building. They've decided to single out the UAE under the guise that they've been involved in the war and bombing and facilitating, etc. And this now leaves a situation of what do we expect Trump to come out with on Truth Social?
I don't know what he's going to say on Truth Social, but honestly, if I'm Trump, I can't let a military attack on one of our allies stand like this. I come out guns blazing. No fucks given.
And they would have seen this coming, right?
Yep.
In terms of intelligence, whether it be CIA, whether it be Mossad, in terms of like they're likely to do this tomorrow, etc. And Trump yesterday, he posted about Project Freedom, didn't he? And the Strait of Hormuz taking place today. And then suddenly this happens today with the IRGC after that tweet. And they were making fun of him saying, you can't control the Strait of Hormuz through tweeting. We do.
This just gave Trump a valid casus belli.
So is he going to... Are they going to be drawn into this again as a replay of what went on before? Or are we going to see something different to what we had before? Because there is that pressure economically. There is this factor of the Strait of Hormuz and the pressure that's being had in terms of the oil price, and that then affects economies, etc. Or are we going to see a left field kind of thing coming through here?
I hope it's not just a replay of what happened last time, because that was honestly a big disappointment. If I recall, the IRGC was like just a week or two away from collapsing because of the military pressure. I hope this time we go in and finish the job.
But, I mean, unpacking finishing the job. This regime is taking the strategy of outlasting the United States, Israel, and others in this conflict, weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz being their ace in their pack in terms of economics, and that they have more the will to survive, betting on Trump and others they don't have the will to stick this out for too long. That seems to be the calculus, I think.
I think the calculus changed as of this morning. Clearly, something had to have changed.
Let's unpack that. What do you think changed this morning?
The pressure that Trump's been applying via the blockade has clearly proven to be a little bit too much. So they've struck the UAE, who, if I recall, had a pipeline to bypass Hormuz anyways. And by striking the UAE, he struck a US and, if I recall, a UK ally. Correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. United Arab Emirates is definitely a UK ally. No doubt about that.
So it's going to be interesting to see if Starmer actually gets off his ass, so to speak.
Well, I'm getting some reports here that Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is saying it's time now for allies to, in terms of pressure on the Islamic Republic. And then a CNN, which, Trump refers to as fake news, Ayatollah CNN, as Iranians describe it, or Ayatollah BBC, says that there are claims that US and Israel strikes in Iran could take place within the next 24 hours.
I'm happy to see it. If it happens, I'm happy to see it.
So we're just getting now reports of new ballistic missiles being launched right now.
Towards the UAE or Israel?
It doesn't say from the south of Iran. I would say it's, again, they're going all out, Sky, for the UAE. Is a non-stop barrage on the UAE this today.
Yeah, we need to step in. UK, US. I'm hoping this time the UN gives NATO a mandate, just like they did during the Yugoslavia war. Because then France and Germany and stuff don't have an excuse to stay back. If they have a mandate, I feel they will act. Otherwise, it's probably just going to be the UK, US, Israel, whatnot.
But then, where is this sense of, is this a wounded beast that's being put in a corner and lashing out because it's got nowhere else to go? Or is it that it feels like it's got the support of China behind it economically and Russia that's giving it a sense of confidence to take this fight on?
Honestly, probably both. If it wasn't for the backing of Russia and China, it wouldn't be lashing out. But at the same time, we have put it in a corner with the blockade.
So we just got some more news. This is quite a busy day of news, actually. The US has destroyed 6 small, fast boats from the Islamic Republic that were attempting to disrupt commercial shipping. And then a senior Islamic Republic military official has said that Islamic Republic has no plan to target the UAE.
What? They're already. That makes no sense.
But this is what they do, isn't it? They talk through 2 different sides of their mouth. Yeah. And it's just, this is the non-stop kind of, one side will say, no, you're our brother, etc. We're all friends here. And the next minute, bing, bang, bosh.
It's how authoritarian regimes work. Say one thing, do another, double speak.
But what's it going to take this time round, though? Because we've had, 3 weeks break or more? And Trump is a great, he's got fantastic instincts, especially when it comes to what winning looks like. And he knows no matter what the damage they've inflicted, the margin of the win is not big enough for him. It still causes a legacy problem. It still causes these main news networks, whether they're fake news or other, to say, oh, Islamic Republic's winning this. Oh, he's put him in a bad situation. There's no off-ramp for Trump, blah, blah, blah. So he needs something in terms of calling it a proper win, a big win. And a lot of people say that without regime change, there is no win. It still ends up in defeat because they still have the same kind of people in charge. They still have the nuclear dust. They still have the intentionality. They'll come back worse, more kind of aggressive, still do the same things as they did prior. So without them taking the nuclear stuff or something, it has to be bigger than what we've witnessed, right?
I'm honestly inclined to agree. Without regime change, there is no win, because from what I've heard, the IRGC kind of led a quiet coup after the ceasefire took place. And all the big, like the president and the foreign minister and stuff, they're all just figureheads now. So without regime change, you're not going to get a nuclear deal, because there's no way the IRGC agrees to let go of its nuclear program or its uranium. And it's going to continue behaving the way it has for 50 years, but worse.
So what? Look, in those strikes, they hit the Navy, they hit the aircraft, they hit the radar, they hit missile production sites, and yet it's still in no shape or form has changed this regime in any fashion. In fact, they feel like they're winning. Some element of that regime feels like they're genuinely winning this. Winning is surviving.
Do they feel like they're winning, or are they putting off the image that they feel like they're winning?
That's a great point. They're all the regime, and they all are what they are, instead of this kind of cloak of reformers and all that kind of marketing PR BS. But there are ones that I think would do a deal because they like their money, they like their power, blah, blah, blah. And then there are others, I think, with that they may think, in fact, we're winning this because winning was never military to military, because that's a lost battle. We would lose and be obliterated. Winning is economic pain, outlasting, surviving, being able to say that we stood up to the great Satan and the little Satan. We took them on. They couldn't defeat us. We came back bigger and better. And we've got serious clout on the streets of the Islamic streets of that. We've done something that others haven't been able to do. We didn't bow down. We didn't end up being crushed. And if that means Iran being crushed, the people being crushed, the currency being crushed, we don't give a damn, as long as we have the weapons and that we got our own bank accounts elsewhere in other countries and everything else, and we're okay because we've got the regime economy and we've got the wider economy, and we'll just turn into North Korea and sod it.
I'm going to put it this way. I used to be a contractor for the Air Force. And as part of that, it's mandatory you get trained in 2 classes called Counterterrorism 1 and Counterterrorism 2. You get taught how terrorist organizations work, how they recruit. And to be honest, for the IRGC, survival is winning. They must be defeated. They must be disbanded. Otherwise, they're going to try to twist everything into a win to use as a recruiting tool. That's just how terrorist organizations work.
Have they been more resilient than you anticipated at the beginning of all this?
No. Because as you pointed out, we've struck almost everything there was that was purely military value. The next thing to go off the list other than the launchers that they've recovered and what they've managed to rebuild, is bridges that are dual use, is power plants that are dual use. Because international law doesn't see a difference between a power plant that's purely military use, per se, which I don't think really exists in the world, and a power plant that's dual use. It sees it as the same thing, which is a military use power plant. You have, because a nice benefit if you strike the power plants, all of Iran's crypto factories go offline. They can't mine any more Bitcoin or whatever.
And that references that tweet on Truth Social, well, not tweet, Truth Social post talking about power plant and bridges day, remember? And then that didn't happen. But a lot of Iranians and Iran as a country, in terms of any future, you do need your infrastructure. And Trump was even saying, if I take these out, it would take them decades to come back from this. They wouldn't be able to come back from this. But you're saying not, it would be more nuanced.
More nuanced.
Yeah.
But at the same time, back in World War II, we blew the crap out of Germany. We blew the crap out of Japan. Within 10 years, they were completely rebuilt. And that includes all the fallout scrubbing and rebuilding we had to do in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So, like, I think if we Marshall Plan like we did during World War II to help the Iranians recover, I don't really see it as a big issue if we hit the bridges and power plants now, if it takes out the regime. Just as long as we're not going after the Iranian people themselves.
But then, like, every country does this out of self-interest, right? No one does it from the goodness of their own heart. It has to involve the self-interest. Israel's doing it as well because it's an existential threat. It just coincides in terms of the interest of Israel with those of Iranians and the history and all that goes with it. But it's because it's an existential threat. The US is doing it as well because nuclear and Trump, that's been a red line. And with this regime, and Trump has been consistent on that point, and he's been consistent about the Islamic Republic for a while. If you look back at his old interviews and YouTubes, etc. Well, there wasn't.
Well, with going back to my point about the Marshall Plan in Germany and Japan, do you think we did Marshall Plan just out of the benefit of our own heart?
No,
it was to keep the commies from coming in.
Yeah,
we don't Marshall Plan with Iran when the war's over. Guess who takes over? Probably the Taliban, because they're right next door.
I would say it's because a lot of people talk about the wider geopolitics side of it, which is such an overused word. But China and the battle in terms of China and the US, and China having this 25-year plan inside Iran, etc., and it relying a lot on energy from Iran in terms of oil, and Venezuela being taken out, that would affect China and would help in terms of the balance of power with the United States, and taking out this regime, and then Iran which would then be a pro-Western, open country like it used to be, a normal country before this occupation. But you mentioned the Marshall Plan, and that was one of the best ones, actually, because Germany, it really worked. It was brilliant, because people talk about, we don't want it to be like this. We don't want it. They always talk reference Iraq and Afghanistan, which aren't proper countries. No offense, but it's reality. Apart from Iran, which is a proper country, thousands and thousands of years old, and they say about how these conflicts led to these situations, and afterwards we didn't plan for a day after. Military-wise, it was successful, but not afterwards. But when you mention about the Japanese, though, is different, wasn't it? Because they only surrendered after.
Because we nuked them twice.
Yeah. They refused because they had this concept that their emperor was a god. That he was a living god back in those days. And he, I think, had to go on TV to say, I'm not a god, right? And they had to nuke Japan because they just refused to surrender. And obviously, we don't want that for Iran.
Obviously, we don't want to nuke Iran. I think that goes without being said. Nuking Iran would not be good. Not on an international stage, not for the Iranian people, and definitely not for America or Israel.
No.
I will also kind of point out, since you mentioned the Emperor is a God thing, that was the military, the Japanese military pushing it, because the Emperor himself was a figurehead in Japan. And that whole thing was pushed by the military so the military could keep their power, even though in practice the Emperor didn't really have that much power. And the first time we nuked them, they didn't know what hit them. And they were like, surely this can't happen again. And then we nuked them a second time, and they're like, oh, yeah, it can't happen again.
So, of course, we're both in agreement that no nuking Iran. Nobody wants that. No way.
Nobody wants nuking Iran.
No way. So the Marshall Plan of Germany would be the right one. Yes. Because a lot of people refer to the Islamic Republic as the Nazis of our times. And there's a lot of crossover to that regime, to what we're witnessing here inside Iran.
I don't know if you need a full Germany-style Marshall Plan, because, I mean, Iran within the last 50 years was a democratic republic. They have some experience with democracy beyond what the Germans had with the Weimar Republic.
Well, the 1979 president has not been a democracy.
So I do think we would have to go in and rebuild things Marshall Plan style. But I don't know if we would need a full government rebuild if, say, Pahlavi came in and was leader.
Yeah, that would go back to what Iran was, which was what is being advocated is that Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, King Reza Pahlavi, the Shah, would come in as a transitional thing until there was elections, which would ideally, people talk about constitutional monarchy, and a secular democracy is the ideal of how things would play out. I personally don't think that would happen overnight. It would take a period of time, just being real, and then eventually would lead to that.
I'm in agreement. I think the transitional period would probably be 5-10 years. If I recall my history correctly, Western Germany, it took a full 20 years to completely rebuild that government from the ground up. I think with the Shah, it might take probably 5-10 years is my best guess.
Look, I often think Iran would have charted what happened in Spain and where Spain is, even though they got a terrible president or prime minister, Sanchez. But put that to one side, they had Franco, and people don't realize Spain was only Spain, I think, after the mid 1980s onwards, when King Carlos stepped in, because they were going to go back to dictatorship again. And as someone said in the chat, and it's true, it's not been a democracy in 47 years. It's been a dictatorship, a tyrannical dictatorship, an authoritarian, tyrannical dictatorship. So just want to make that absolutely clear on this live. But people often talk about the day after, yet the reality is, Guy, there hasn't been a complete victory over this regime for 47 years. That's the elephant in the room.
And the only way to get rid of the IRGC is complete and total victory. Because they're not going to just lay down their arms and surrender.
No.
That's not what terrorists do.
No. And when it's not a pro-Western dictatorship like Mubarak of Egypt, right, then they don't have the same pressures, because when you're a pro-Western dictatorship, then you have to have things like you worry about your arms contracts, you're worried about the kind of links, the business side of things. Then they have kind of pressures on the human rights. Then they have also some options of where to go to and leave. When you're the opposite of that curve of a dictatorship, where you're more kind of Russia and China facing, they're more difficult to move because they don't have that same things, because the greater powers are very different in terms of what they look like, your Chinas, your Russias compared to the United States, etc. And historically, they've been more difficult to get rid of as opposed to Western dictatorships that have fallen because they are constrained in whatever form or shape because of it and the Western relationships that they have. So North Korea has been notoriously difficult because they have nukes. That was their ultimate insurance policy. That's why Islamic Republic wanted nukes. It would be their ultimate insurance policy. You couldn't do nothing. You can't do nothing then, right? You really can't. That's what they wanted. And then you've had situations where Cuba's been difficult, although Cuba's on the menu by the looks of what the Trump administration talks about, but it's been difficult. Venezuela was difficult until Trump stepped in with Maduro. It was difficult. No matter what was going on, it wasn't moving the dial. So because these regimes tend to be more difficult when they're anti-Western, because the powers that are helping them, they have different kind of factors in play.
I do want to qualify that. I do feel Venezuela has still been playing hard to get, even with Maduro in jail.
Yeah, it's true. Because some people say the regime hasn't changed.
I'm in agreement with that. They haven't really changed. Sure, they've become slightly more US facing, but only slightly.
So it's basically taking Maduro out, but it was essentially the regime still in play. It wasn't regime change, it was changing the behavior in the regime, as Rubio talks about and others. I think that's what happened with Venezuela, right?
Yep. Unfortunately, I wish it was regime change that we had enacted, but Trump was only in there for what, a day at most?
Yeah, but it was a big enough win, Sky, for Trump, because the operation was terrific. It was something out of a movie. The way they came in, took him out, how he was pictured in handcuffs, had the whole Hollywood look to it, clean cut, everything done. It was big enough win to say job done, right? In terms of what their thought processes were. And remember, the IRGC in Islamic Republic had a lot of dealings with Venezuela as well, and stuff that was going on there, which was another thing. But I'm just getting some breaking news that the Islamic Republic attacks have targeted civilian sites and facilities now in the UAE. Civilian, not just petrol infrastructure areas like Fajura, etc. Now civilian sites and facilities. And they've targeted US Navy ships.
Oh, it's on. If they're targeting US Navy ships, it's on.
With cruise missiles. Reuters, which have been notoriously bad on reporting on this, they're reporting and saying that the Islamic Republic have targeted commercial and US military vessels with cruise missiles.
You know what happens when you fuck with U.S. boats, Johnny?
What?
Well, for example, what happened with Japan when they fucked with U.S. boats at Pearl Harbor? What happened with this regime when they fucked with U.S. boats just prior to Operation Praying Mantis?
Mm-hmm.
They're about to get a proportional, and I'm using air quotes very heavily here, response.
But this is, look, they love to play chess, right? Iranians love to play chess. Some people say chess was invented by Iran. Some people say by India, right? Regardless, they love to play chess, and they really think of themselves something when it comes to all this kind of stuff. They're not totally mindless. They are actually quite calculating. So I guess the regime have calculated in terms of risk versus reward that they are going down this line because the opposite was an inevitable strangulation economically, which would have led a total collapse to the regime and also busted the whole oil side of things, because I think there's only a certain amount of time you can store it, the oil, before it starts to blow up.
Before you have to start shutting down wells.
Yeah.
You don't know if the wells are going to come back
Exactly.
up or if they're going to be damaged. And
yeah. So they've taken the calculus that we need to go down this line, hit UAE as being a weaker link perceived coming out of OPEC, seem to be cozying up to Israel or whatever, right? And the US in terms of their thought processes. And then look to get the US and Israel involved somehow to then absolutely torpedo the oil market to inflict such pain that the blockade would stop, that the terms of any type of deal would be completely different, and the Islamic Republic will come out of this victorious. They will survive another day, and that their tactics worked because their whole thing has been regional chaos, mayhem, oil prices. So how do you counter that in terms of your next step? Because they will know this as well. We're talking about this on YouTube and X. We've got 723 people watching this, right? That then what do they do in their next chess move to not obviously fall into this kind of trap of economic warfare, which is what they're doing really through the targeting the UAE?
If I recall, the U.S. is the world's largest exporter of oil. And that includes crude, that includes gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, all of it. The U.S. is, if I recall, is also the world's largest exporter of liquid natural gas. Anything Iran tries to do to send up oil prices technically also benefits the U.S. because oil is a global commodity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oil sells higher, U.S. companies make more money. And so I just don't think, I think Iran's playing the chess move of they're trying to probably do mad is my guess. But not military destruction, economic destruction. I just don't think they are going to win. However,
the petrol prices there in the US, what is it now?
I'm going to for gasoline. It varies state to state. In fact, it can vary gas station to gas station, as I'm sure you're aware. But it's between like 370, 424 here in Utah.
And Americans are very sensitive to gas prices, right? Historically, it's always been
historically, yes.
With the midterms,
I know there's been some unhappiness because of current gas prices as well.
Mm.
The most of the criticism I've seen of gas prices has been coming from the left and not the right. Unless you're the horseshoe right, like Tucker Carlson and the crazies.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson. But Emirati media reporting that the UAE is preparing a severe retaliatory response against the Islamic Republic following recent attacks, warning of harsh revenge.
War's kicked off, Johnny. War has kicked off.
But they wanted this, though, didn't they? I'm just trying to be smart about this. The regime
Do
obviously
we
has-
know how much the Iranian military or the IRGC communications have gelled since the ceasefire took place?
Well, there are reports that it's been really severely affected. There was reports that when it came to the supreme leader, I don't know what capacity he's in. Some people say at best he's incapacitated totally, or he's dead. But regardless, messages were being done thousands of years ago through paper form, written down, passed through messengers, and that it was all decentralized, wasn't it, in terms of command and control prior to the war, which each kind of commander or whatever areas of the military were kind of doing their own thing under a preset of agreed instructions or whatever they agreed to before this all happened.
There's benefits to mosaic control. That's not what I believe is happening in the IRGC right now. I think it's completely shit-faced and fucked when it comes to communication. We don't know. Nobody knows how well the IRGC has been able to regel. And communicating via letters, that's snail pace in today's world.
Mm.
You could have arguments going on right now via mail in the IRGC trying to figure out what's even happening.
The Islamic Republic media are saying still that they've got no plans to attack the UAE. What?
Doublespeak. How much do you know of your 1984, Johnny?
Orwell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Doublespeak.
Yeah. I'm getting some reports here. All Israeli flights to Dubai have been suspended.
Yeah, that's expected.
Mm.
Airline insurance and whatnot.
Mm. So let's play devil's advocate, really. That the regime wants this to go back where there's kind of regional conflict again, and to go back to this state of fighting again, hoping that the oil markets will explode. Is the US going to bite on this, or is there something else planned that's going to be different this time, knowing that they're doing this economic terrorism here?
You mentioned that cruise missiles have allegedly been launched at U.S. naval assets.
Yeah, according to Reuters, yeah.
I just, if they truly are fucking with U.S. boats, that will draw in the U.S. I just don't see any alternative.
Yeah, try not to play on YouTube, just so you know. But
to be fair, there's a lot of good YouTube channels that drop the F-bomb.
So CENTCOM, they're saying that their ships didn't get hit.
Maybe they shut down the missiles, or maybe the missiles
Maybe.
never got launched.
Yeah, because they did do loads of them in the war, didn't they? and nearly all of them got shut down, didn't they?
Yeah. So it may be accurate that cruise missiles were launched at U.S. naval assets but shut down. I mean, this is a fast evolving narrative right now.
You hit the nail on the head with that. You hit the nail on the head with that. It is,
like this is literally breaking news.
Yeah. So the UAE said it reserves its full and legitimate right to respond to Iran attack, which means the Islamic Republic. But yeah. Well, which would be in coordination with the US, wouldn't it?
It would. I don't know how much intelligence capabilities the UAE has on its own. That's something I'm unfamiliar with, but I'm pretty sure that they'd be working with U.S. intelligence already, even before the strikes. So anything they do would probably be in coordination with the U.S.
So Israeli military official, the IDF is monitoring the Gulf escalation and remains on high alert. Our air defensive systems and offensive capabilities are at high level of readiness, which have not changed since the ceasefire took place. No changes to the Home Front Command civilian guidelines at this time.
Do you play much poker, Johnny?
I have had time playing poker in the past, yeah.
Have you heard the phrase, don't tip your hand?
I have heard of it, but do explain.
You don't want to show the other players what kind of hand you have.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon that statement by the IDF is a form of not tipping their hand. They may be, for all we know, they could be getting ready for strikes right now.
Who's more likely to do that? Is it Israel or the US? Or the UAE now?
If what Reuters says is true, I think it would probably be UAE and US, and then bringing in Israel.
And what do they look like, these strikes? Is it going to be pretty much as you were, like what we had? Or is it a different scale altogether?
My guess is full-on warfare.
And what does that mean exactly?
Airstrikes, possibly ground invasions, because we've been seeing ground forces building up. It's gone up, what, 100,000, 200,000 since the ceasefire?
But the US is so sensitive to that, aren't they? You mentioned the word ground forces. There's a lot of pushback.
This is a defensive war now, Johnny.
Yeah, I know what you mean in terms of the narrative and the emphasis. But how does the US psyche on ground? Because I think I saw somewhere where a group of Republicans were going to do some kind of initiate some kind of legislation or whatever to
War Powers Act, you mean?
Yeah, and I think it was actually in terms of enabling Trump to initiate military stuff, even though he doesn't have to technically go back to Congress to ask for permission. I know there's the 60-day thing and another 30 days to get the troops back, 90 days in total, but then they argue the ceasefire stopped that, so the clock restarts, etc. He doesn't have to ask them. But they were going to do something on the lines of allowing Trump and the administration to initiate strikes, but it will be in a very kind of limited fashion in terms of window of time frame, and would prohibit ground forces.
I honestly would have to read up more on the legislation that's currently on the table.
I think it's a group of them. I don't know if they're, we have like what's called in politics the usual suspects in any political party, where they're always against the executive, where they try to do this and that, or is it an actual the mainstream of what the thinking is in the party on that kind of basis?
As far as I'm aware, the majority of the Republican Party is very pro Iranian intervention.
And MAGA's what, 92% favorability on what Trump's doing?
I believe so.
Yeah. Look, it has to be something different this time around, right?
It has to.
And
otherwise, it's Groundhog Day.
yeah, and they want Groundhog Day, folks.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, because that is exactly what they want. They want a rerun and a replay of Groundhog Day, and it would have to involve somehow neutralizing or muting the Strait of Hormuz in some way, and that would maybe involve some kind of ground component, wouldn't it?
You have to have some kind of ground component.
Yeah.
Because even with Venezuela, we had a ground component.
Yeah, it did. A highly effective one. They talk about Park Island, which is 90% of all oil stuff goes out Park Island. But then others said there would be like sitting ducks. That wouldn't work. It'd be better to take the ports or the areas around the Strait of Hormuz in terms of ground component.
There's pros and cons to taking Karg Island. I mean, they can just shut off the oil going to Karg Island from the mainland, but they don't really have a place to distribute that 92% of their production elsewhere. And if the Iranians do say strike Karg Island after we've taken control of it, they're just destroying their own infrastructure. That being said, if I personally did ground forces, Karg Island would only be one component of what I did.
Look, I think the next 24 hours is going to tell us a lot, right?
We're going to find out a lot.
Even tonight, potentially, Sky.
We'll see what happens.
Well, listen, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for coming up on the show. And it's good to see a face behind an avatar. And I think somehow, some way, this story is just unfolding. But let's see like Trump says, let's see what happens.
Good talking with you.
Take care. That was Sky. This has been Eternal Iran. Who's this? Dave. Who's Dave? Let's see, Dave. I'm going to try it with Dave. I don't know some of these folks, guys and girls. I've had lots of people come through my spaces say, let's take a flutter and let's see if Dave is friend or foe.
I'm your friend. I love you, man. I follow your show all the time.
Got you, Dave.
But I'm at work
just
today.
Put the link out, and you never know in Twitter land.
Huh? Say again.
I put the link out to join the show. You never know with Twitter land.
Yeah, sure. I went to X and then I saw you, so I just clicked on it.
Yeah, I keep calling it Twitter, X. What's your thoughts, Dave? What's your thoughts on what's going on here?
Oh, no, I work in oil and gas. I live in Norway. Yeah. And I'm at night shift, so I just carry on. I have to look at all those screens for 12 hours a day.
And how's this going to impact? Because in my last discussion, I was talking about how that they want this economic warfare, so they push up the prices and cause a global collapse, or economies being really hit and hurt. How does this play out? Because they know this, don't they? The US knows this, and others, they know what they're doing.
The oil companies, I mean, without any doubt, the oil is running by United States. All those major companies is owned by US, or like Total, French company, he also have a lot of shares in America. And right now, in order for us that is worth it to produce any oil, we need to have oil prices about $70 to $80. So that's break even. That is worth it to start pumping out oil out of the world. That's the kind of price we need to have. But everything above that is pretty good. I mean, Norway, we do great. The economy is, Equinor is a Norwegian state oil company. They made about 500. What are they talking about? I don't know the exact number, but their profit the last 40, 50 days has been enormous. That is so, but the cost of the petrol is expensive. That's why we're feeling it, because the petrol is expensive. But Norwegian government, they subsidize it. So the government take the bills. And we are back to normal prices for petrol. I think most of the countries, they need to do that. They need to, in order to support the war, because this war need to carry on, and we need to come with a result that we knock this regime down. So the governments need to support the subsidize the petrol prices.
The problem is there's a different reality, because Norway's rich. It's got a sovereign fund. It's rich in oil and gas from the North Sea, which shares with the United Kingdom, but has a bigger, and it's got a small population. So the impact is different, because if the UK does it, because most of the oil price here in the UK, for example, 65% of the oil price is made up of taxes. So 65% of the price that you pay for your oil is paying the UK in terms of the UK government on taxes. If they were to subsidize that, that would then have an inflationary pressure, which would then impact interest rates, which then would impact mortgages. And when you've got deficits and a weak economic climate like the United Kingdom, which has a huge population, for example, London is bigger than most Scandinavian countries. I think it's about 10 million people in London alone. It's a very different proposition. And I think other countries are the same in terms of France and Germany as well. Whereas Norway, it can do that, and it doesn't then have the upward trajectory of inflation, which then impacts interest rates, etc.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about sharing free petrol to people. You just bring the prices back to what it was before the war, because we had the petrol was 18 NOK every liter here. After the war, went up to 30. So they brought it back to where it was. So people doesn't have too much effect of it. And as the government doesn't need to do much. You just cut the taxes a little bit, the way that British people and American, they are very, special Americans, because now they pay about $5 a gallon, and they used to be about 2 or 3. So you just need to come back where it was.
The problem is, and I'm all for cutting taxes, but the problem they have here in the UK is that they've got this debt issue, which has been bubbling along for a while, ever since COVID. And that has allowed, or not allowed, governments to then be able to do tax cuts to help businesses, to help the consumer, etc. So instead, they've gone, Labour's been awful anyway, but on top, because Labour historically puts up taxes instead of reducing taxes, it's always been its spin back in the past, and more public sector heavy than private sector. So the problem with the UK is that they're in a climate where economically it's not a good state of affairs. Things are very tight. they don't have the latitude to be able to go down those lines.
No, they don't.
That's the issue that the UK
Yeah.
has.
But the most important for us is that Donald Trump carry on as now is a midterm in America, and that the petrol has huge influence in America with the voters, and we don't want those Democrat taking over. And I think if Donald Trump losing this midterm, it could be an end of the everything for us.
Yeah, because he sweeped it in terms of the Congress, the Senate, and obviously won the presidency.
We don't have any issue right now. He can do whatever he wants.
Even the Supreme Court is to his
Yeah.
favor in terms of the judges and Republican versus Democrat. And he would severely hamper him. And also, Trump doesn't like to do long wars. So what's going to change the equation? Because I was speaking to Sky about this. What went on to what goes on, it can't be the same as pretty much what we had, right? Because the regime came out of that thinking, well done us. Yeah, we're suffering, but I don't care about Iranian suffering or Iran suffering. For us, victory is about surviving. And we can say we took on everyone, blah, blah, blah. We're inflicting more pain on them. They can't outlast us because there's going to be political pressure, etc. There's midterms, there's an election in Israel, there's all these things coming up. What changes the narrative where their cockiness or their cock-assuredness in terms of how they come out, what they say? I know they project these authoritarian regimes, but what will really change the dial this time around, if anything?
I think if I mean, we need to talk, or media need to talk to people about what if we stop the war? What's going to happen if we just peace? I mean, we can go back before the war starts. This regime is the winner as long as as long as we don't American doesn't topple this government. They think they are the winner. It doesn't matter how many of their leaders die or what they lose, but it just so there's no doubt that they go after a nuclear bomb after this war. If they survive, they're going after the war, and they're going after the bomb, and they're going to execute a lot of Iranians. They're already talking about it. And also the Gulf countries. What's going to happen, the relationship between Gulf countries and Iran after this? If the state of the Iranian government is going to be the same as it was. It just, there's no way to go back. I think is a worst thing Europe. I mean, I don't understand what the Europeans want, why they don't support this war. Because now we are at the point that there's going back is just we have another North Korea, even worse in Middle East.
You know what it is? I think it's economics as well. Europe is in a far worse situation than the United States, for example, and is much more dependent on energy. This is why Ukraine played out so hard on the United Kingdom in Europe, because they were relying on Russian oil and the projects they had with Germany, etc. So, and also the Europeans not being great with these kind of things generally when it comes down to it, and being a bit late. So you're right in terms of the GCC, because that would affect business confidence, that would affect investment. What? They still have the regime there after the regime has shown that he has just attacked left, right, and center, the UAE and other countries and territories. There's going to be a big cloud. And all of these, because the GCC are all trying to reinvent themselves because the oil's running out. They're trying to be like a tourist hub, an investment hub, a crypto hub, an entertainment hub. You've got 2013, Saudi, all of these kind of things. That relies on investment.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, it won't be there as much, or there's a question mark if the regime is left there. So finally, in terms of your comments on this, what does winning look like, and how is this going to happen?
I think Iran is like where Iraq was in 1992. I think this is a long run. I think they just need to put the pressure on Iran in next 5 to 10 years, maybe. I think that's what's happened to Iraq. It took American 10 years before they go back again, and that was open road for them. Americans, they just took about 24 hours to get to Baghdad. So I think this is the way they should do with Iran. They should, if they cannot win the war soon, like one of those days, they shouldn't put the pressure off Iran. They should just carry on, and we have to just prepare. This is, I think Iranian people, they sacrifice not only for themselves, but they do it for whole world. Just imagine how the world looked like without the Iranian regime. I think the effect is everywhere. We can see the effect of the Iran everywhere after this regime. If there's a pro-Western country regime taking over, and I think we just, in Europe, we don't think about what's the consequences for world to have this regime carry on. What's going to look like after this if we just if we just end it? That's my view. I think America have plenty of oil. I think Europeans, they don't like China need to have Iranian oil because they're buying it very cheap. I think in Middle East, most of the oil coming out of Middle East is first coming to Europe, and then is Japan and India.
Well, the UK doesn't need it because all of its oil comes from the North Sea.
Yeah, and then also they get also from US. So North Sea and America American oil should be for Europe.
The reality, though, is it's never going to be 5 or 10 years because they survive this, they survive and stay. Because there won't be another Trump. There won't be another.
Could be a Rubio.
There won't be another Bibi in Israel either. The world will be a different place. They would have moved on. It's described as the final battle, and all the regime's ever interested in is to buy more time. That's been its recipe for success. And should that be allowed to happen, then that would be it, in my view. But sometimes it either happens or it doesn't. People describe it now or never. But we shall see. But I've enjoyed the chat, Dave. And
thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much. I turned off my camera.
All right, you take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So that was Dave. It's interesting doing this. I'm trying to do it more like radio, folks. So I'm going to get people to come in and out in the show moving forwards. So it feels like live radio where people come in, have their say, etc. If you like that concept, let me know. When we're doing these kind of things. So I'm going to end now, folks. I think I'm going to end the stream, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We shall see what happens and where this all goes.